Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the launch of the Safe Spaces Report and Toolkit launch. My name is Aleem Ali, and I'm your host for today's event. But before we begin, I would like to pause and take a moment to acknowledge country and the continuing fight of First Nations people and communities across this continent for justice, transformative change, and self-determination. We had actually organised and asked a traditional owner to share a welcome to country for this event today. However, in the light of the referendum result on Saturday, the 14th of October, and the week of silence led by First Peoples and the Uluru Statement from the Heart, we have instead made a donation and suggested to the traditional owner that they need not attend. I think it's important to acknowledge that the grief and disappointment in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities is palpable. And as non-Indigenous Australians, we need to take responsibility for that. In their graciousness, the Uluru Statement sincerely thanked many millions of Australians of love and goodwill who voted yes. But as gracious as the sentiment is, having failed to deliver a resounding yes, we, as settlers on unceded lands, should neither require or rest on a thank you. Rather, our intention and our commitment should be to strengthen our resolve to continue to fight for recognition, justice, and a better future for First Nations communities across this country. I'm joining you today from Wurundjeri country. I pay respect to elders past and present and thank them for their continuing custodianship and willingness, often in the face of ignorance and injustice, to continue to welcome and embrace people of all backgrounds and from all nations. And I also extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us for this event today. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of Welcoming Australia. Welcoming Australia is an official partner of the Safe Spaces project. We work with leaders and organisations across the country to cultivate a culture of welcome and advance communities where people of all backgrounds have equal opportunity to belong, contribute, and thrive. The Safe Spaces project was developed to enhance the capability of local councils and other community-focused organisations to engage women from diverse backgrounds to better understand why some public spaces and places are viewed as unsafe. The project was a deeply collaborative effort involving Welcoming Australia through our Welcoming Cities initiative, the local councils of Melton, Monash and Wyndham, along with Sydney University, Griffith University and Monash University. So to give you a sense of today's order of proceedings, in a moment, I'll introduce Nina Taylor, the Parliamentary Secretary for Justice in the state of Victoria, who will formally launch the report. This will be followed by a research presentation from Rebecca Wicks and Nicole Calms. We'll then hear from our panellists from 3 local councils in Australia, and afterwards we'll have approximately 20 minutes for Q&A. So just a couple of tech tips before we kick off. In the top right of your screen, you should see a view button. If your screen is looking a little bit cluttered, I would strongly recommend that you click view and then hide non-video participants, and that'll make sure that only the people who are speaking are essentially in your screen of view, along with whatever they're sharing on their screen, if they're sharing anything. And then the other thing to note is that we will have a Q&A at the end of this presentations. And to engage with that, you should see a Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. Depending on how large your screen is, you might need to click the More button and then select Q&A, and you can put your question in there as this launch progresses. So without further ado, I would like to warmly welcome and introduce Nina Taylor. Nina was elected as the member for Albert Park in 2002. Previously holding the position of member for Southern Metropolitan Region. Prior to entering Parliament, Nina was a local councillor at Glen Ira, I believe, advocate at the Community and Public Sector Union, and volunteer at the Women's Legal Service. Earlier this year, Nina was appointed as the Parliamentary Secretary for Justice. She supports the Attorney General with a range of priorities and projects across the justice portfolios, Nina's vision for Victoria's future is that it is an accessible, compassionate and educated state. Welcome, Nina.
Thank you so much, Aline, for that very warm welcome, and good morning to everyone. I would also like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we are meeting, including the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, where I join from today. And I'd also like to pay my respect to their elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all Aboriginal people with us here today. And it is my great pleasure to be part of the launch of the Safe Spaces report today. And I would like to begin by acknowledging all the community members who participated through the co-design process over the last 2 years. And I'd also like to thank the key contributors behind this project. So we have Professor Rebecca Wickies, Associate Professor Nicole Carnes, Yogeshwari Bishu, Colin Bostock and Sinead Gilligan. And fundamentally, everyone deserves to be safe and feel safe in public. We know that women, and particularly women from multicultural communities, may have a different experience of public spaces. This not only impacts their enjoyment of those spaces, but also their connection to the broader community and the opportunities that brings. We also know effective crime prevention comes from listening to the community and engaging with them in finding solutions, especially from those who are most often impacted by it, to get the work right. This project set out to do just that. I would like to acknowledge the 3 councils that participated in the project: Melton, Monash and Wyndham. I commend you on your commitment to ensuring public spaces are not only safe, but also inclusive. I hope other councils across the state pick up the toolkits and use them to better engage diverse community members to improve safety in public. I'm sure the reported toolkits will be a very valuable resource now and into the future. The toolkits are not only built on the lived experience of the women who generously gave their time to the project, but also on the expertise of Monash University, including the wonderful XYX lab, Griffith University and the University of Sydney. The Allan Labor government is proud to have supported this project through the Crime Prevention Innovation Fund, and I'm particularly proud of our continued support towards progressing gender equality in Victoria, because we know that for a society to thrive, we need to make sure women are supported. We are also proud to be taking significant steps to protect Victorians from hateful speech, conduct and violence through our anti-vilification reforms, which seek to expand these laws beyond race and religion and improve our criminal and civil protections. Because we want to strengthen our laws to protect our vibrant and thriving multicultural and multi-faith communities and hold those who vilify to account. I would like to finish by again congratulating all involved in this marvellous project and subsequent report. To all involved, I thank you for your ideas, your enthusiasm and your commitment. I'm sure the toolkits will reap benefits for you and for your community in a wide range of ways for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. We really appreciate your time and generous words, and for formally launching the report. We're delighted to have you with us today, and we're quite confident that the report and the blueprint and the deliverables will assist local councils and community organisations to really engage well with women from diverse backgrounds and lived experience. So thank you. I would now like to introduce Rebecca Wicks and Nicole Carnes, who are the research and co-design leads on the Safe Spaces project. Professor Rebecca Wicks' research focuses on neighbourhood social processes and their effects on crime and other social problems in Australia. She is the lead investigator on the Australian Community Capacity Study, an internationally leading longitudinal study of the concentration of community problems. Rebecca is particularly interested in the safety and inclusion of immigrants in Australia and is involved in several projects that examine migrant women's safety in the home, in the community, and in the workplace. Welcome, Rebecca. Nicole Kahn is an associate professor in the Faculty of Art, Design and Architecture. She's the founding director of the Monash University XYX Lab, which leads national and international research in gender and place. Nicole's research examines digital, experimental, political and material interventions to reposition design as the strategic tool for challenging gender inequity. Her recent research has focused on public transport spaces for women and girls, gender-sensitive crime prevention, and the use of participatory co-design to challenge gender-neutral urban policy. Welcome, Nicole. Welcome, Rebecca. Over to you both.
Thanks so much for that, Aleem. And thanks everyone for coming. We're just thrilled to have you here, and we're very excited to be sharing this report and all of the toolkits that go along with it. I'd also like to acknowledge that I am on the lands of the Yurubal, Yugara and Turrbal people, and would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us today. Aleem, I so appreciated your acknowledgement of country and can only echo everything that you've said. I would also like to start by acknowledging the wonderful team that we had. As has already been alluded, we've had an incredible partnership. We've got everyone's details there on the screen for you to see, but it has been an absolute joy to work on this program. And I think most importantly, we have to acknowledge the women that spent multiple experiences with us through surveys and focus groups and walking interviews and co-design. We've had a number of women who stayed with us for the entire journey, and I really, we want to dedicate this research to those women and to all women who have a desire to belong and feel safe in public places. So just to, I guess, highlight the project objectives, we had three main objectives that we pursued with this project. The first was to identify women's awareness of the problems in public places and what they believed were the appropriate approaches to address those problems. And we did that through quite traditional methods, the methods that we see used again and again in, the fear of crime or the worry of crime research. The next step we took was to try to understand women's experiences in and around these places and the specific physical and social cues that lead women to feel unsafe. And we did these through some walking interviews, which I'll talk about in just a moment. Then we wanted to consider how we might imagine different strategies to improve safety in public places as they emerge through a co-design process. And Nikki's going to talk a lot about that in just a few minutes. But to just say here that what we're really keen to do in this space was to not just understand what one woman thought about a particular strategy towards improving safety or belonging, but to think about how women, when put together with other women with different lived experiences, different views and perceptions about public places, how we could kind of get to a shared understanding of what might work in particular areas, apart from just adding more police. Thanks, Nikki. We could go to the next slide. Thank you. So as Nina mentioned, it was a 2.5 year project. We connected with over 200 women from Melton, Monash and Wyndham City Councils during that time. The first phase was to just do a really deep dive into both all of the statistics we could get our hands on. So we looked at census data, all of the data that the local councils hold themselves. We did a systematic media review to ascertain how problems were being framed and discussed in the local media, but as well the state and national media, to get a sense of what sort of signal crimes might have happened in those areas and what might be leading some people to be feeling unsafe. And we collated that for each LGA. We worked in partnership with the local councils to ensure that we were kind of encapsulating the right kinds of data. So we were harmonizing our knowledge the whole way through. And that was a really important part of the process. And again, that collaboration that we had with the local councils was central to the success of phase 1. So once we had a really deep understanding of the kinds of problems, historical and contemporary, that were being experienced in public places in each of these local council areas, we then started to engage women who were living in these areas. And we did that through short surveys. Just if we could go back, Nikki. We did that through short surveys. We did that through interviews. And as I was saying before, we also did that through walking interviews. So one of our colleagues, Dr. Charishma Ratnam, who is with us today, she led that part of the project. And that was where we organized for researchers to walk with women in places where they felt either unsafe or that they didn't belong, or where they felt safe and where they did belong, and to sort of share with us what were the physical and social cues that were present in those areas that would lead them to the way that they felt. Now, through all of this in phase 1 and phase 2, we then developed a really strong background bit of data that could inform the development of a co-design workshop. And I'm not going to talk too much about that because Nikki will talk about that shortly. But just to say that when we launched the co-design workshop, we did so with a very strong foundation of knowledge about these 3 local areas and about the way in which women felt about those. And then after the co-design workshop, we followed up with focus groups and short interviews with all of the women who participated, or as many as we could get who had participated all the way through phases 1 through 3, to get their further insights as to how this process had unfolded for them, and any further feedback. Thanks, Nikki. We then, in looking at across all of these phases, then we had 4 key findings which emerged very clearly and very strongly in the various data sources that we were using. Overall, I think it's very safe to say that for nearly every woman who participated in this research, their concerns about safety in public places their concerns were grounded in deeply gendered experiences and perceptions of safety and unsafety in public places. They were issues that were particular for women. And when we looked at that more in a more in-depth way, we could see that across all of these LGAs, we had sort of common problems and standard solutions. And this was predominantly from phases 1 and 2. So from phases 1 and 2, we could see that the concerns that women had were almost identical. There some put more emphasis on some problems than others, but essentially the women in all 3 of these LGAs were reporting on the same things, regardless of where they lived. And they were coming up with the same kinds of solutions when it was one-on-one engagement. So they were saying, oh, I think we need some CCTV, we need more lighting, we need more police. And we know from a research perspective that those aren't always the answers. And that's why this co-design element of it was so important. But I guess what I want to emphasize about the common problems and standard solutions is that when we look across LGAs, women feel very similarly in similar kinds of public places. And this is an opportunity for local government to start thinking in a scalable way about how to tackle these problems. And we can come back to that when we have our panelists. I know that they're going to be talking about that. The other finding that came through really strongly was that when you collectively design safety for women, you see how women are able to navigate their experiences, to take into consideration the experiences of other women. So when you're planning with women, and women are thinking about the problem holistically and together, there's a really wonderful opportunity to identify innovative approaches to enhance safety and well-being in public places and spaces. And that came out really clearly in the co-design workshop. The other core finding is that when we're thinking about safety and belonging, we have to think about it diurnally. We need to think about it, about what it means in the day and what it means at night, because often these things are conflated. And I think when people are saying they want more police or they want CCTV, they're thinking about particular nighttime places. They're not thinking about how they would like those places to look during the day. And one of the things that came across very much when we did the co-design is just the need to activate spaces that make them desirable places for women and for children to congregate, and to do that in creative and interesting ways. And then to think about how to make those places perhaps a little bit more safer with more formal mechanisms of control in the later hours of the day. So really thinking about it as not something you set and forget, but something that you have to think about safety and belonging. You have to think about what needs to change throughout the day and the night to encourage those feelings of safety and well-being. And then finally, for women, safety and inclusion, these feelings, these perceptions are completely underpinned by a connection to place, a connection to the natural environment, and a connection to other people. And when women feel connected to place and to people, they feel safe and included. And that came through a range of different activities that we engaged with women with. And I think that we have to be thinking about safety when we have to be thinking about connection when thinking about safety. And so when we're thinking about CPTED solutions, if they aren't socially generated CPTED solutions where we're encouraging connections, where we're encouraging encounters that are pleasant, we can put all of the hardware out there that we like. People aren't going to change how they feel about that place. And so those were the 4 really key findings that emerged. And I'm going to stop chatting and turn over to Nikki, and she can take it from here.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to step through some of the issues around the report and the toolkits. The report is a very fulsome document, 126 pages that you can get stuck into and really see things like the methodology that we use, the different phases of the project, particular aspects of the finding, and there's a very fulsome appendices as well, which support the research. Each toolkit there are 3 toolkits, and they share a similar kind of framework. So they are each in a similar format where there's key definitions, an introduction, what we're calling a blueprint. There's a particular topic area that is for the specific toolkit. And again, there are key resources and references that relate to that specific toolkit. The blueprint is really about detailing the importance of gender-sensitive approaches with an intersectional lens. So this provides some information about issues of access, appropriate forms of facilitation, how to make accessible materials, really understanding the purpose of engagement and what engagement with women can and can't reveal. It charts what to do when time and resources are limited. And this was a very strong part of the feedback we received from councils, what to do when there is limitations around resources and time. And it also talks about how to communicate outcomes to women, which is a really important part of that kind of circle. And so you can see here some of the images of the blueprint, which will be available to you, about how we're kind of detailing respectful engagement and purpose and times and resources. In terms of Toolkit 1, which is about walking interviews, this steps through a range of interview types that you might want to deploy, the purpose of each of those types, and gives really clear instruction about how to document each of those types. With Toolkit 2, it's focused on the community safety surveys, and this is really about getting ready to undertake this form of engagement, different types of sampling and methods that you might consider using. Importantly, how to administer surveys and what are some of the ethical considerations that you might need to be considering. And also issues around data sharing, and again, that kind of circling back to women who have shared their kind of insights. So in terms of co-design, with this particular toolkit, we're talking about who and how to engage, and really how to support women to engage in this process, how to think about remuneration and how to think about what expectations you have of women in your communities, but also what are the expectations that women may have of participating. Again, the importance of communicating the outcomes and thinking about how to get this process right. What we know is that co-design is absolutely a process that councils want to try. In fact, they do try it sometimes. They get very nervous when they do it. And they're likely to be under-resourced when they want to kind of use this mode of engagement. So this toolkit really helps councils, like the 3 toolkits, helps councils to be confident and to know when to kind of reach out for support and what kind of expertise might be required. So I did just want to talk about the fact that this research project really is walking the talk. We know that the integration of participatory and what I would describe as a feminist co-design method can really ensure that practitioners and communities understand why women feel at risk in cities. We need to understand where the barriers exist and what we believe, or what women will believe, will enable their participation. And if we centre women in this process, we can really use design approaches to address inequity in cities. We also know that for more equitable cities, designers and practitioners and communities really must engage with women across the design process. So this is iterative. These concepts, the complexities of inequality, these have to kind of be incorporated as part of the design process regularly. And this is when we know that we can contribute and positively shape cultural narratives. And I think finally, by really thinking about how to deliberately oppose this idea of top-down approaches to communities and cities and urban life and all areas of kind of coming together in the urban realm, we know that women's agency and engagement in design process and practice is central. And this requires that design practitioners really think about engaging and employing these methods in these toolkits and engaging diverse stakeholders and engaging the people that are going to benefit from the work that we do. And this is across urban, suburban, peri-urban, regional and rural areas. So in terms of accessing the report and toolkits, they're going to be in your inbox at the end of this session. So keep an eye out for them and share them widely. And if you do have any questions or comments or feedback, you're more than welcome to get in touch with Rebecca or myself about the research and work, and we'd be absolutely delighted to hear from you.
Wonderful. Thank you both. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Nicole, for briefly highlighting the process, key findings and themes, and outlining the blueprint and key toolkits. This is, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, and certainly the participants won't realise this is really important and exciting participatory and feminist-centric work. And I know that people will be very keen to read and dig into the practice that this work can support. So now, I guess, to the practitioners and to the people who engage directly in this work and certainly will be moving forward, I would now like to invite our panelists. So if you can turn your video on to reflect on the Safe Spaces project and their own experiences in engaging the community to improve perceptions of safety and belonging. I'll introduce them, each of them collectively or separately, but in a row. It's fantastic to have them with us. We're joined by 3 representatives from local councils. Firstly, Colin Bostock, who's a key partner in the Safe Spaces project and currently the coordinator of neighbourhoods and placemaking at the City of Monash. He leads a team of placemakers and is also responsible for community safety and advancing reconciliation through the delivery of Council's Reconciliation Action Plan. Colin joined Monash after a role with the state government, helping deliver a neighbourhood renewal project. Welcome, Colin. Colin is joined by Yogeshwari Biju from the City of Casey. Yogi is an architect and urban designer and leads the urban design unit at the City of Casey. She's a design champion with a mission to create design excellence within local communities with a genuine interest in prioritising the safety and well-being of women and girls in the design of our built environments. Welcome, Yogi. Finally, but certainly not least, we have Sinead Gilligan, a Community Development Officer in Community Safety at the City of Kwinana in Western Australia. Sinead's from an international background of community development work. She's passionate about grassroots community change and brings a community-centred approach to her portfolio. The work Sinead has done on Love My Neighbourhood has not only changed the local community, but seen a crime reduction of 70%. And these accomplishments have paved the way for a novel initiative called Street by Street, which is presently being implemented and is showing some exceptional results in its efforts of enhancing community connection. So welcome, Sinead. Welcome to each of you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to begin with a question for all of you, and you can sort of self-nominate how you want to answer, in which order you want to answer that. But I guess a key goal of the Safe Spaces project was to create a set of tools that could be used to encourage engagement with women on matters of public safety. That's the premise, essentially. From your perspectives, how applicable are these toolkits to the work that you're doing to bring diverse groups of women together to improve safety and inclusion in public places? Well, maybe I'll have to nominate. Yogi, do you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Aleem. Hi, everyone. That's a great question, Aleem. So when it comes to creating great places, there are still several gaps between policies and practices, and there isn't much clarity on how to incorporate the inclusion of gender issues into urban planning and design. So tools like the Safe Places are absolutely important to guide local governments and community groups to create impactful change. And women's safety in urban environment is not a new topic. There has been a notable increase in the number of gendered violence, those that are directly related to poor design of our streets, built form, open spaces, public transport nodes, and the like. So definitely there's a pressing need to prioritize the safety of women and girls in infrastructure planning, design, and delivery process as well. So at City of KC, we are very much committed to changing this. Our vision is to create a safe and inclusive environment for everyone. And we all know the way a city is designed has an impact on the sense of safety and well-being of women and girls. So designing our city with a gender lens and incorporating the voices of women and girls can minimize potential threats. By focusing on women and girls who are the most vulnerable, will also ensure a safe and inclusive city for all. City of KC, we are one of the fastest growing and the most populous metro municipalities in the southeast of Victoria. Our population growth is exponential. Therefore, we are putting greater focus on delivering quality community infrastructure to meet the growing demands of our communities. So we've been working very closely with our project partners, XYX, Women's Health in the Southeast, and also XYX Lab Monash University with Nicole Calms. We've had a successful partnership with her and her team in creating gender equitable places in KC. And we also have a team of a task force members called the Gender Task Force. We have around 40 members who sit within the task force, and they represent a wide spectrum of women and young girls across all walks of life, and they live in KC. So we've been working with Nicole Calms and our Gender Task Force on gender issues within KC. And externally, we've also been working with community groups. Internally, we've been working across cross-divisional collaboration as well with community safety, gender equity teams, urban design, and city planning teams. So for us, the Gender Safety, the Safe Spaces report is really an important tool that we would love to embrace. Particularly, it's very relevant to our work, and it has heaps of information on what a respectful engagement with women looks like, understanding purpose of engagement, and also identifying the right stakeholders. Something that really interested me is seeking the unusual voices and engaging with the hard to reach women. I would really love to test those principles in a KC context. And I already see several opportunities where we can, engage our gender task force and trial some of the tools outlined in the Safe Spaces report as well. So very excited, Aline.
That's great. Thank you so much. Colin, I might come to you on that question. How applicable are these toolkits to the work that you're doing in the city of Monash?
Well, thanks, Halim, and hi, everyone. I'd just like to echo what Yogi said there. A lot of that is applicable across all our LGAs, I suppose. But for me, I think what's important about the toolkits is that they're accessible. And as Yogi mentioned, we've got to work across, numerous departments within council to try and deliver these safe spaces, across our placemaking environment. And as Nicole said, that they're accessible. They're now a document that I can take around the other council departments. As Yogi said, we're working with our engineers, our transport engineers, sustainability, city design, and to have this toolkit to be able to push out to them, show them what we want to do. Here in Monash, we've been pretty successful. We've had a fair bit of funding through the Department of Justice. We've rolled out a number of placemaking projects around community safety. But I think if I put my hand on my heart, I can say that we really haven't done the co-design process properly. And this project has really opened our eyes to the benefits of doing that co-design work. And there's a lot of pressure on local government at the moment to do community engagement better, to make it more engaged. So these toolkits are going to be really useful. So thanks, Alim.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And appreciate your honesty in where the work can improve. Sinead, from your perspective, where do you see as, sort of the potential benefits of this work?
Thank you. So exactly as Colin and Yogi have said, I would echo those, what they've said, but also when I look at how applicable they are to my work, I look at the community here at City Kwinana. We have a population of just under 50,000. We've the largest Aboriginal population in the metro area. We've 42% of our population is born overseas. 19% are speaking another language at home apart from English. So we have a very, very multicultural population. The city has very much in the last few years moved towards a more innovative framework for engagement and focusing more on that whole relationship. So it's not just that transactional experience for a community member. And we have started to move into that co-design space, which is very, very much community-led. And so this all supports the toolkits. The toolkits, I think, it's fantastic because I think as much as we are moving to that co-design space, we haven't got that toolkit yet, and we hadn't until now, is for working with diverse women. And I think it's so important, and I think it aligns really, really well, especially here for us, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm going to come to each of you with a specific question, but before I do, just a quick reminder to our 200 plus participants that the Q&A is open. Questions can be directed both to our panelists, but also to our presenters. So if you have any questions as this launch continues, feel free to put them in there, and we'll try and come to as many of them as possible. But before we open it out, Colin, these toolkits require collaboration and strategy across multiple areas of local government. You spoke briefly to some of the challenges of that, but what do you see are the very real and specific challenges in terms of opportunities for interdepartmental cooperation when designing ways to improve safety and inclusion in public places for women in your community?
Thanks, Alim. I think for us, I think it's worth outlining that it's been a bit of a journey. I can't speak for other LGAs, but over the last decade, placemaking, community safety, that focus on place has grown, and we're not all experts at it. So to have been on this journey through this project, and it started way back before Safe Places. There was XYX Lab did a project called Your Ground, where we got the community to put pins in the map to show us where they were seeing problems, and I think that sort of led into the Safe Places project. And it really sort of opened our eyes to the fact that we've got to do this co-design. We've got to work more closely with the community, and more importantly, as we've discovered, with our migrant women, our women more generally, and get to understand what their issues are on the ground. And with the toolkits, it's a great opportunity to convince our engineers, our project managers, everybody across sort of sustainability, etc., how we can solve some of those issues in a way that makes those places safer for everyone, but more importantly for women. We've got some real challenges in Monash coming up, Aleem. We've got the suburban rail loop will be coming through our area. We're the first cab off the rank, if you like. We've got 3 stations. We've got precinct plans to develop. The state government wants to increase living there. The whole issue around the station. So the toolkits are going to be fantastic to be able to work with ourselves and with our external partners like the Suburban Rail Loop Authority, etc. So, I'm really pleased that we've got those. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you. Yogi, I don't want to embarrass you, but you've been truly instrumental in systemic change to design principles in the city of Casey. So I'd really value your insight, and can you share more from your perspective about what is needed to encourage engagement with women community members around improving safety and inclusion in public spaces?
Sure, Liam. So at Casey, in terms of systemic changes, we are increasing the visibility and participation of the women and girls in our gender task force through a number of safety audits of key precincts across our city. We are also consciously applying a gender lens in planning and design of our major city shaping projects. So similar to what Colin said, we've got 12 level crossing removal areas in Casey and 4 brand new train stations. And we all know transport nodes are critical, and that's where people, places are, and they are heart of the communities. So we are applying this conscious gender lens when we design these spaces. We are also adopting co-design processes. Our processes are still very preliminary. The Safe Spaces toolkit would be something very important, which will help us take this to the next level. So we are looking to also improve participatory and inclusive approaches in our design workshops. So bringing in a handful of our gender task force members, sitting around the table, discussing plans and drawings, so we can get feedback from them firsthand. And also at Casey, any project or program that is public facing must have a gender impact assessment inbuilt into it right from the start to finish. We are also rolling out internally trainings to assist staff in why this work is important and relevant to support sustainable and impactful change. So these are some of the strategies that we are employing at the moment. But I would also love to partner with Nikki and Rebecca and look at using technology in sort of turning this static data into intuitive geolocative maps. I mean, similar to your ground, but more like street view imageries and things like that, so that our community gets an appreciation on how council is not only keen on receiving their feedback, but also what is council doing to address these concerns and how our place is being transformed. Maybe that's something I would like to explore further with the Safe Spaces team as well. But yeah, on a number of fronts, even with our design excellence program and other city design projects that we deliver, gender safety is a key design criteria for us, and it's front of mind when we deliver our projects.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And a really good segue to Sinead, who is also leading and witnessing significant success in your work. So I've kind of got a 2-pronged question for you, Sinead. How do we promote a different approach to councils and community to encourage these kinds of processes, co-design processes, to improve safety and inclusion for women in public spaces. But also, it'd be great to just learn a little bit more, if you could tell us a bit more about the 7-day makeover approach with young people, and how maybe that could be developed or translated to include diverse groups of women.
No worries. So just to, I suppose, answer that first part, to promote a different approach, I guess the first thing is, like Colin has said, it's a journey. You're not jumping straight to co-design. And, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to go in beforehand. So when I look at how did we get to a co-design at the City of Kwinana, I looked at our journey. We first went into place plans. That was our first experiment into placemaking. That gave us a bit of a realization, is that we needed to do engagement differently. We got a whole different engagement framework, because we needed to engage differently. We started to trial little projects and then started to trial bigger projects. And some of those were like Love My Neighborhood, which did show great outcomes, but a very different way of working, and very much walking side by side. But at each step, we would test, we'd put it into action, we'd learn, and we'd celebrate. You got to celebrate the small wins, the big wins. You gotta keep everybody on that journey. So it's elected members, your exec, everybody needs to be, because as you know, Colin has said, you need the whole city, you need all the different departments, you need the community. It isn't just the person driving the program. You need everybody on that journey. We then went in and we did, you know, parks for people. It's an upgrade to a park. But you've got your planners, your landscape architects, you've got your community engagement, you've got your community, and you got a budget, and you got to give some good, give and take. But at the end of it, you have an upgrade that community are very invested in there. And you know what that gives council? It gives us the courage. It gives us the confidence that this is what community want. They want to be part of it. And so you start to look at those bigger projects. And I suppose to answer that second part is, yeah, it did give us the confidence here at City Kwinana. So in relation to the 7-day makeover, if anybody they've never heard of it, it's basically a project by Creative Communities International. They carry these makeovers, 7-day makeover of a street all across the world. David Enright just leads and pioneers this program, and he works side by side with council and helps to guide this whole process. For us, that street was basically, it was attracting antisocial behavior. It was people who were just very in, out, because it was a space that people didn't want and they didn't feel safe. Youth were part of carrying out some of that antisocial behavior, but we also wanted to see youth using that space. So very much, there is a lot of groundwork that goes into it from council, and it was our place leader, Elise Brewis, who really drove that across with the youth development team, lots of other teams. But basically, the 7 days, you get to that co-design, and youth were given their own budget, and you know, I suppose helped to really make that space. But after the first 2 days, they're on the tools. It's, you know, you've put in the planning, they're on the tools. They're working alongside carpenters who volunteering their time in the community, elected members, directors, depot staff, community engagement. By the end of the 7 days, you have a space that they are invested in, that they have put their time and energy in. So, you know, and then you start to look at it and you think, oh God, brilliant. The end of the 7 days has really just lit that fire for what that space and how it's going to be used. But you've got a space that people are very invested, and you could easily change out youth for diverse women. I could easily, now looking at that toolkit, using some of that early work and really getting that that early intervention with diverse women to make sure that they're on that journey, right into the co-design, right into putting it. Some of the evaluation, the early evaluation, 94% said they felt proud of their local area. 89% it helped them feel part of the community. So I look at your toolkits, I look at that co-design, and I look at the next step is that 7 day, and you could easily put diverse women. I think it's, yeah, for me, it's very exciting because I can see, as we are a growing community who's very, very multicultural, I can really see how it all aligns.
That's great. Thank you very much. I can see a growing list of questions. And I was going to throw a question to you all without notice, but I can see that it's kind of been asked by one of our participants. So I might jump there. But before I do, thank you. Thank you for answering those questions. Thank you to our presenters. I'm actually going to invite them back. So I'm going to invite Rebecca and Nicole, if they want to join us virtually. Turn your video on, please. And now over to you, our esteemed participants, and some of your questions. I'm going to jump. We will try to get to as many of them as possible, but I do want to jump to, I think it's Kerry's question, where she notes that Yogi has rightly stated that safety and inclusion of women and girls in public spaces is not a new topic. Yet we still struggle. We still struggle with LGAs endorsing a consistent process for designing and creating gender positive public spaces, which, as I think you've probably highlighted our panelists, that still fall to one or two or a few champions. How do we, this is kind of Kerry's question, but I will specifically get to it. Like, how do we overcome that? How do we get a more consistent approach to this work? How do we, what, from your perspective, particularly council representatives, do you think would make councils hesitant to engage with this work? And then specifically to Kerry's question, what are the policy levers that could be pulled to ensure that this work really is embedded and required of people, working in this space in your councils and organisations?
I mean, Yogi, I was just going to say that one of the leverage points that we've had with this research, but also with the work that we've done with Yogi and Colin and many councils across Australia, is just there's the gender equity policy that is now in place in Victoria, but also the Women's Safety Charter in New South Wales. And those two particular pieces have really compelled councils in particular to get on board in quite a particular way. Now, you might describe that as a kind of mandate, if you like, but actually, I think that this is what has happened in Europe, and the councils that have said, actually, we know what's coming. We know that this is going to be a huge part of our remit in public placemaking, like Casey and like Monash. They have really kind of been driving and leading the way with some of the work that they've been doing. And the only other thing, Yogi, you might want to riff on this as well, is the design review panel. So that's been an opportunity. So Yogi has put together the Casey Design Review Excellence Panel to really ensure that there's good representation and a kind of critique of architecture and design and placemaking that I think is really valuable and does seem to champion the issues of equity, diversity and inclusion.
Definitely, Nikki. I think in Casey's context, the gender equality and family violence prevention strategy sits quite high in the order of strategic framework plans. It sits next to the council plan and our 10-year community vision, and strongly advocates for gender inclusive approaches within the organization, but also in all of the works that we deliver for our communities. So that's a critical planning lever from our end in our organization that's working really well. And from a design process perspective, as Nikki mentioned, the Design Excellence Program is another avenue that we're using to promote gender safety across design and planning of our built environment.
If I could add, Yogi, you and I need to have a chat, because we're getting there in Monash. We're now seeing lots of other involvement in our ISPs, in our integrated site plans, in our precinct plans, whereas I think previously, people were working in silos. I think those barriers are being broken down. So there's that much more engagement across the departments that are delivering these improvements to place. So, we're not working in isolation anymore. We're much more cohesive, and that's leading to better outcomes. Yeah, thanks.
Aleem, can I ask a quick follow-up for that? Because I think policy levers often need data, right? Like they need to have solid research. And I wonder if the three of you could comment on, what I guess just how readily available that research. We've been so blessed to have the grant from the Department of Justice and Community and Safety that allowed us to come together like this. I mean, this happened because the Department of Justice backed us. But what other kinds of, I guess, approaches are you taking to get the kinds of data that you need to persuade those that are in charge of the silos to break down those barriers and to start working together, thinking about economic efficiency of sharing resources? What data do you need that you haven't got at this point? I think anybody, Sinead, do you want to kick off that one?
I can tell you that we're the Your Ground project fed into the Safe Spaces project,
yeah.
but now that to launch in New South Wales as well. So that's kind of been taken up. And I mean, it is just the intersectional data of women, and in this case, gender diverse people's experiences across all ages and locations and areas of urban environments. And there's a huge data gap. You're absolutely right, Rebecca, but also some of your research project, that spatialized data set is, I think, it provides a leverage point, and I think for a long time we've been working with anecdotal evidence, and now we actually can show the kind of statistics and facts, which I think councils really find valuable, because then they get the next grant and they have the evidence to say it's here and this is what needs to be done. But there's a lot more work to do. We all know that.
I think you're right, Nicole. Following up on that, I mean, the simple process of applying for grants, we need that data. We need to be able to show that there's a problem, that something needs fixing. And previously, it might have been, a short survey on the street, talking to people who use the space, but no real in-depth data, that deep dive, which I think, Your Ground and now this Safe Spaces report, amplifies. We've really relied in the past on, our basic community surveys that go out, and our profile ID, which each council has access to, about our area. So there's a lot more work to be done around data collection and understanding the data. We can collect all this data, but if you don't understand what it's reflecting, then that can be difficult. Thanks.
Sinead, from your perspective, is there a data gap? And also, what is the incentive, do you think, for council and the decision makers? Because often the people who are leading the work aren't the decision makers in this space, to get involved in this work.
For me, I'd agree with you, and agree with Colin, is I suppose up until now, we've been using the same thing like a benchmark and catalyzed survey, but is that the right tool? No, I don't. Is it giving us the right information back? No, I don't think it is. And I don't think it's in depth enough. And especially, but I guess one of the challenges we have here is we have a rapidly growing community, and it's trying to keep up with it. And at the same time, it's not only rapidly growing, but it's getting more and more multicultural. So it's nearly looking for the right tool on how to deal with it. And I guess that's, to me, is where this toolkit will be very beneficial, because there isn't a lot out there. There isn't a lot that gives you that kind of blueprint on how to actually carry this out. But if you can start to go to the ones higher up and start to push that up of, here, we've got something. This is, what other local governments who, are thinking outside the box as well. This is what's working, and could work in ours, because there's definitely a big gap. I mean, there's been probably a huge push towards that inclusion in community, but actually creating safe spaces. No, I think there's a lot of work to be done.
And I mean, also the part of that, I don't know if you agree, Sinead, is that words like co-design. I mean, people are probably exhausted by these words, and they have become buzzwords. And I think that the commitment we've made in the toolkits and all three of the toolkits is to really think about how they are applied in a rigorous research-driven way, because it can be quite messy if it's not really thoughtful. And you're asking a lot of women when they come into these processes. So we do need to take that quite seriously. But also it does get a bit grey when they have become buzzwords. Even the word inclusion, I would argue, is now just something that is flapped out everywhere. And actually how we really articulate and follow through with that as a kind of strategy and a commitment, I think it's a moment where we need to recalibrate that. And it's tricky. It's really tricky.
I would agree and completely agree with you that co-design can be often overused. And I know when I was reading the report, and I was like, I even asked the question was, about police and had they been in that co-design and the reasons, and I understand why they weren't. And I guess, I can totally understand that. I guess what we had looked at the city was when it came to the implementation side, is they didn't help with the co-design, but they kind of came in to reinforce of, wow, that's really good, and just to kind of back up what community was already doing, and nearly to just come out and go, well done. You're actually you're on the tools, you've put in the work, and just that side of it. But I think exactly co-design, in the past especially, can look very, is it co-design? And I think this is going a long way to show real, I suppose, real backing behind that and a real co-design approach. So yeah, well done.
Nikki Beck, I had a question for you. It makes me think that, have you approached other tiers of government? Should we have a national protocol or a statewide approach to safe spaces? Would love to hear your thoughts.
I mean, Yogi, you are just, you're singing my tune. Yeah, we absolutely need to. And I think that's one of the reasons why we have Welcoming Cities and as a partner for this, because I thinking about what safe places actually means and how we interrogate that. And as Nikki alluded to before, I have another project where we've kind of passively tracked people's movements around the city and sent them what we call ecological momentary assessments to get how they feel at the time throughout different times of the day and in different kinds of places. And getting back to what Sinead was saying about, like the community surveys, they are not revealing what's happening out in the community. They need to be done differently. And so I do feel like we're collating a massive data, right? The Your Ground data, the perceptions and experiences of place data, the safe spaces data. We're working towards a program of work here that will be industry focused, developed with, in partnership with local and hopefully state and federal government. But yes, we need to be thinking about this differently. And we cannot just assume that because we have 50 women who would do a survey or 20 women who've done interviews, that we know about all of the experiences of all of the different women who come to a place and feel unsafe or unwelcome. And so we've got so much work to do, and it kind of has to come from the bottom up. But at the same time, state and federal government need to be thinking about policy, need to be thinking about funding the right kind of research that's going to hit the mark. And I feel we're just at the beginning of that journey, even though I recognize one of the questions, one of the authors of the question said we've been talking about this a long time, but then we just have been talking about women as this unproblematic group that all think, feel, and engage with space in the same way, which we know is completely untrue.
One thing that I recognised has changed, and there's a question from Ayan in the Q&A about men and masculinity, and this, I think I'm becoming slightly more confident about answering this question, although I'm going to come at it in a slightly different way, I'm afraid, Ayan, which is to notice that it used to be there was a woman in an LGA who was just kind of flying the flag for gender equality. And when that woman left, the whole kind of system collapsed in that LGA. And I think that has changed. And I mean, we've been working with Casey for a long time, and you do have men in that organisation who are championing gender equality and Casey. And Colin, you're also somebody who's kind of working against that not stigma, but you know what I mean. And I think that we're starting to see men take up the issue more readily, which I didn't think was going to happen, I have to say. And so, and this isn't about mandates, it's about genuine concern and care and commitment to inclusive places. And that's a key part of what needs to happen for us not to be here again in 50 years still talking about the same issues. Now, how that happens genuinely, I think, is an interesting question. But that, I think there is a shift happening there.
You. I'm going to jump to the top of the question list to Dr. Rachel. It's a bit of a process question, noting that it's truly fantastic work, which is putting feminist strategies at the heart of co-design and policy. Wants to know if we can perhaps talk more about the obstacles encountered, more specifically in working with a diverse group of stakeholders. Were there tensions among different groups of women? If yes, how were they resolved to then, inform the production of the toolkits?
Do you want to take this, Nikki, or you want me to? Okay. I mean, there's always tensions in any kind of collaborative project, right? I think that you can't work with big groups without tension. So there were tensions, and of course, different councils in particular have different limits on resources and skills and capabilities. Councils are different in the way in which they can approach some of these problems. So I feel we've had an exceptionally successful collaboration. We had the most incredible women who spent time with us. And I think it was just making sure that women's voices were heard, and I think it sounds so simple to say this, but, if there was a problem, it's about putting the problem on the table and discussing it and trying to find a solution, recognizing that there is no one solution that satisfies everybody. And I think that was part of our learning. One of the genius things that XYX Lab did in the co-design was that they used all of the data that we had collated to develop these personas, right? And these women, any woman could see part of themselves in a persona. Any woman who read it would say, oh yeah, that would be me. And so these women that were represented in the personas allowed the other women and the other stakeholders to see themselves in some small way, even if they might not have agreed with the gal who was sitting at the table, who, had a different idea about what a public bathroom should be like, or what have you. They weren't solving the problem for themselves. They were solving the problem for a woman who represented a diverse identity, who had diverse experiences, and that created an atmosphere for women to start to elevate from what their own experiences were and to start thinking about their own experiences as intersected with both the limits of the council, limits of design, and the experiences of other women. And of course, that's imperfect. We did the best job that we could do, but I think that way that we approached it, it wasn't about how we will solve your problem, but how will we solve a problem of safety that might impact a woman like this. And I think that changing of the narrative and that discourse shift allowed for women to, and all of the stakeholders that came to our co-design, it was amazing. We had people from all walks of life, all government departments. It was just the best day. I'd say the best day of my career. Loved it. But it allowed them to actually have a conversation. And it wasn't about, well, I want this and you want that. It's about, how do we create this? How do we create something that is beyond the sum of who's at the table? And that, to me, was the magic.
I would just add that, the kind of circle of people that we work with is really important to thinking about this process. So many years ago, I worked with Yogi's team and the task force that she had convened, which were an extraordinary group of diverse women. And I don't think I'd actually had a kind of research experience with that level of diversity of age and ethnicity. And so that was a key kind of learning in terms of my own approaches and thinking about how to do that well. And Rebecca's absolutely right. It's not perfect, but we don't look for consensus. And I think that is the trick. If we look for consensus, everybody's going to be unhappy. And so the idea of kind of thinking about You know, what is a shared experience of women's issue inequity? That can be the way into this particular work, but also it doesn't stop here. And we need to kind of keep going around in a circle and check in with Colin and how the toolkits went, and revise and rethink and make further learnings. And the same with all of our colleagues and peers. This is why we're here. It's a community, you know.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's a really useful observation, that this is a living document and living process, which is important to note. Another sort of process, I guess, related question from Joe at CoHealth, along with a generous offer of help. Thanks, Joe. What supports do you think you would need to transition towards co-design? You know, possibly keeping in mind the comment about the challenge of the language of co-design. But, you know, what does that look like in terms of making that transition in some organisations that may be, you know, not as across that process or understand that process beyond, you know, their challenge with the terminology?
Well, I mean, that's what the toolkit assists with. It talks about what the process is, but also when you might need to consider expert consultation. I think that is part of, we answer that question quite fulsomely in the toolkit. It's not necessarily saying this is the kind of, we don't share activities, because actually I think it requires expert consultation. And so the kind of setup and understanding how to do it well is precisely what this work addresses.
I think further to that, Nicole, I certainly will be doing some work internally with council, bringing together those important people who need to have an understanding of co-design, and with the report and the toolkits, I think I can put that together, and if I use the term sell the co-design ethos, and hopefully that will generate enough interest that, you know, if I'm putting in a budget bid for some funding internally to be able to really roll out co-design in some of our projects, then, you know, that's a good thing.
Yogi or Sinead, did you want to wade in? You don't have to, but you're welcome to. No, that's okay. Question about, I guess, application in different contexts. So going to Ahmed, who's, you know, said that there's obviously a big focus on municipal-led projects. That's been the overall focus of this project. But, you know, how might this translate into private or community-oriented projects? You know, is work being done to encourage this uptake in other spaces? Yeah, I think that's the essence of the question.
I don't want to speak for other organisations, but a project that I'm aware of relates to the Women's Safety Charter in New South Wales, where they actually have a community of practice which invites local businesses and organisations who are in the private kind of sector to kind of make a commitment to thinking about equity in the built environment. So that would be one example, Ahmed, that I could give you about how that might work outside of just the perhaps limitations of local government. And I think it's quite successful and quite a rich community that they've been able to develop. So you can have a look at that. I'm happy to share further information.
Great, thank you. And then there's a couple of questions left, which are really, I think, and I'm happy to take any of the panelists and presenters' takes on this, but it really boiled down to transferability and intersectionality. So whether it's gender or, you know, translating, as Sinead talked about, you know, youth involvement in placemaking, you know, etc. How transferable is this work in your opinion? And what are sort of some of the learnings which can be implied in this space at those intersections, also of queer and gender diverse groups?
Look, I think with this project, we were particularly interested in thinking about women's experiences from migrant backgrounds. Now, that means they can also be gender diverse and might identify with queer communities. And so that was a kind of remit of this project. I think what we did that was kind of interesting in the definitions, we've kind of encouraged communities to define what that kind of underrepresentation might look like, because it's different for different communities. And when, you know, we were hearing before about Sinead's kind of demographic population, that may require a particular definition that might be slightly different to another LGA. And I think that communities should have the agency to work with women to think about what that might mean. And so I would say that's one thing. I'm not sure that projects have to be everything to everybody. So we've been talking about Your Ground, and that is a project that's about women and gender diverse people. But, you know, different research has the capacity to engage in different ways. I think that the research that we've done is about diverse women more broadly. And I think that you will find, Ayan, that there is a very clear relationship and a way to engage with queer and gender diverse people in this work. But I'm a really strong believer in it's okay to kind of focus on a particular area and do that work well. And lots of people contribute to this space, and we need all of those voices and all of that research. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think
Rebecca is, sorry,
oh,
I was
sorry.
just going to throw to you. No,
oh, okay.
No, I was just going to throw to you and get your perspective as the other research lead.
Yeah, look, I think that some things, don't need to be transferable. I agree with Nikki on that. And I also think, just getting back to what some of our panelists were reflecting on about the kinds of data and research that's been available, that's thinking about the gender and diversity as something that is complex and needing to have the right kinds of data with. We're only at the beginning of this. And so I know, I'm very keen to start engaging with men, with younger men, with men of color. Like we also need to be thinking about men, because these spaces and places belong to everyone in a community. And I will argue, from my perspective, you get it right for women, you get it right for most people. It's going to work pretty much for the vast majority of everyone in that community. When women and children feel safe in public places, those places are vibrant and people want to be there. I also recognize that, some young people might want to use public space in a different way that might grate some women, that they don't like the presence of young people, maybe behaving in ways that they themselves don't deem appropriate. So I do think there's more work to do. I wouldn't want to see this as transferable to, to men, for example, or to young, to adolescent young people. I don't want to go there yet, because we're only just beginning to unpack the complexity, and we've got a lot of work to do before we're able to sit at a table with different members of the community with different demands on public places and spaces and say, how do we get this to work for everyone? We've got work to do. And I think that that's coming, and we should be excited about it, but we shouldn't expect that what we've done in one project is going to suddenly solve the connotation around the use and attachment to public places and spaces. I don't know if our panelists want to chime in on that.
Yeah, could I just quickly follow up on that, Rebecca? I think local councils are in a great position. We've got a number of advisory committees, LGBTIQA+ advisory committee. We've got a multicultural community advisory committee. We've got a strong gender equity team here at Monash now. We're leading the way in Victoria on GIAs. We've had a big tick on that. So everything's in place. As you said, we're sort of ready. If we can take forward the work, then we're in a good position to be able to engage right across the community. Thanks.
Thank you. Yogi, Sinead, any closing comments or thoughts?
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think exactly as you said, Rebecca, it's not that it's necessarily transferable, because it is very complex. But I guess what these toolkits are giving us is to, you can look at what have been the challenges, what has worked. And so if your community has a diverse community, they can, they've got something to sit down and go, like, I look at, the 7-day makeover, and I go, if it was happening in a different part of the city, we want to look at diverse women. we've got something that we can actually go, hold on a second, where do we start? Well, we've got some really good, and I'd like to think could come back to safe spaces and say, hold on a second, this looked like a challenge. We're still finding it a challenge. How do we? And we start to learn from each other, and we start to build so that there isn't only one or two, you know, I suppose, research out there, that there is more, and we start to build on it, and we start to learn from that. Because yeah, you can't just take it and, you know, swap it out for another minority group but I just think it gives us something to really think about, and all the different steps within the 3 toolkits.
Yeah, definitely agree with all of the other speakers as well. This is going to help us get our own house in order first, and perhaps as local government lead by example.
Wonderful. Thank you all. More than 450 people registered for this event today. I mean, that alone, I think, is an indicator of success and the vital need for this work and the report and the toolkits. And a lot of work has taken place to get to this point. The report is now launched. The toolkits are available. But in many ways, as each of you have highlighted, the work is just beginning, right? So I'm really excited by what might come next and how people apply this work and the learnings that come from it. So thank you. Thank you again to our guests. Thank you to Nina Taylor, MP. This project was made possible by the Department of Justice and Community Safety, Building and Safer Community Grants. Thank you to all our participants. Thank you for your excellent questions and your time and attention today. I hope you found it useful. I hope you found it informative, and may we all continue to strive for places and spaces that offer safety and belonging for all people. So thanks again, and hope to see you all in various contexts very soon.